The sky over Earth was bruised red and violet as the last of the orbital defense satellites went silent. Smoke rose from shattered cities like ghostly fingers reaching for help that wouldn't come. The world was no longer fighting a war, it was enduring annihilation. Every nation's last weapon, every fleet, every soldier, all crushed beneath the relentless advance of the Vocari swarm. Cities had fallen in hours. Oceans boiled where their hives landed. Humanity had weeks at most. But deep beneath what was, left of old Geneva, one man stood inside a hidden command chamber. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't have clearance codes or medals. But he had something else. Knowledge no one else dared touch. His name was Wren. He had once been a defense analyst, then a whistleblower, then a ghost. Governments buried his research. Scientists called him a fraud. But everything he predicted came true. The Vocari, a sentient hive mind species, were not interested in conquest or diplomacy. They were terraforming Earth into a breeding ground, one incompatible with human life. And only Marcus had discovered their weakness. He hadn't slept in 3 days. The last functioning orbital array, built secretly in low orbit by a rogue, UN faction, was now fully under his control. A prototype device rested at its heart, one capable of disrupting the Vocari's psionic network. The problem, it needed to be manually armed and fired from orbit inside the swarm's atmospheric control zone, a suicide mission. Marcus stared at the screen, eyes sunken, jaw clenched. Behind him, the remnants of the command crew watched him in silence. There were no speeches, no goodbyes, just a nod and a single line of code typed in. A hatch opened. The launch pod hummed, and Wren ascended alone. The journey up was not smooth. The Vocari had seeded the atmosphere with energy storms and gravitational distortions. The pod shook, systems blinked red, but Marcus gripped the console like a man holding onto his last breath. Outside the porthole, tendrils of purple lightning slithered like snakes in the clouds. As Earth shrank below, he whispered something to himself. Not a prayer, but a promise. Not again. Never again. He reached the station. Half destroyed, frozen on one side, boiling on the other, it drifted like a dying whale in orbit. The power grid flickered. The prototype, a weapon called the Neural Sundiver, sat in the docking chamber, connected to exposed conduits humming with volatile energy. Marcus entered the access code, bypassed the AI safeguards, and began arming the device. But then a whisper. He spun around. Nothing. The whisper came again, like a dry wind inside his head. Marcus, you see us now. He clutched the side of his head, pain spiking behind his eyes. His memories flickered. His wife screaming in the rubble of Berlin, his daughter's last voice message, the day he watched the swarm descend from Saturn's orbit. The Vocari were speaking to him. You are alone, broken. Surrender. We will end your pain. He gritted his teeth, forced his fingers to keep typing. Go to hell. No, there is no hell. Only joining. Become part of purpose. The lights dimmed. The station trembled. A dark shape drifted into view, a massive Vocari queenship, larger than any previously recorded. It began to glow. They had found him. Marcus initiated Override Sequence 7. A red prompt blinked. Manual detonation, T300 seconds. No turning back. He pulled the oxygen mask tight, left the control room, and climbed through the maintenance crawlspace toward the Sundiver. A crack in the viewport let him glimpse Earth, scarred, burning, but still spinning. Still alive. The queenship fired something, a pulse. The walls around him began to melt. Time slowed. He crawled faster. Then another whisper, closer. You are not one of them. You belong to us. He reached the device and punched in the final command. T60 seconds. The queenship outside began to unfurl. It wasn't a ship. It was alive. A brain, floating in space, pulsing with energy like a heart. Its gaze was focused on him. He hesitated. A memory returned, sharp and unwanted. The lab. Before all of this, before the swarm arrived. He had seen them in simulations, energy patterns, psionic interference. He'd mapped them, he knew what they feared, and then he had buried the results because he was ordered to. Another voice entered his mind. This one wasn't Vocari, it was his daughter. Daddy. You always fix things. 10 seconds. Marcus reached for the core. The Vocari queen screamed into his mind. His nose bled, his hands shook. He smiled. Let's fix everything. He plunged his hand into the Sundiver's activation core. The world outside turned white, and then silence. Earth's transmission logs recorded a single massive psionic shockwave emanating from low orbit. All Vocari signals ceased instantly. Their ships dropped from the sky. Their bioforms collapsed, inert. The war was over. But there was no trace of Marcus Wren. Only a burned insignia on the Sundiver's hull, recovered years later by a salvage crew, a single line etched in heat-scored metal. He saved Earth alone. And just as historians began writing his final chapter, a deep space distress beacon lit up 3 light-years away, and it was broadcasting his voice. The beacon repeated itself every 70 seconds. The voice, hoarse, distorted by time and distance, crackled across ancient receivers in an abandoned deep space array orbiting Alpha Centauri C. It should have been silent, decommissioned. But something had reactivated it. A single phrase, looping endlessly through the dark. If anyone hears this, I'm still here. The message was impossible. Marcus Wren had died. Every record, every sensor reading, every testimony confirmed it. He sacrificed himself to trigger the Sundiver's core, unleashing a psionic shockwave that crippled the Vocari swarm and saved Earth. That moment had become legend. A shrine was built at the coordinates of his last known position. Children studied his final act like scripture. And now, 3 years later, his voice was calling from a place no one had reason to look. Command didn't believe it at first. They blamed signal corruption, an echo, maybe a tribute transmission. But one person knew better. Commander Erin Voss. She had served with Marcus once before the war turned him into a ghost. They weren't friends. They weren't enemies either. But she remembered his voice. It haunted her. And when she heard the beacon, she packed a crew and left within 24 hours. The ship was the Lucian's Edge, a repurposed stealth frigate with deep space capabilities. Voss brought only 6 with her: engineer, medic, pilot, AI handler, linguist, and a silent security officer named Hale, who'd once been Black Ops. As they drifted beyond Pluto's edge, the stars grew sharp, the silence deeper. Something about the message felt wrong. Not dangerous, just altered. Like Marcus wasn't just calling for help, he was warning them. 30 days into the journey, the Lucian's Edge dropped out of fold space near the source. The planet was unlisted, hidden in the gravity well of a dead brown dwarf. It had no atmosphere, no water, no reason for life. But on its surface stood a structure. Ancient, black, shaped like a spire, wrapped in ribs of silver bone. And inside it, the signal pulsed like a heartbeat. Voss suited up and descended with Hale and the engineer. The others stayed in orbit, watching for movement. The surface was lifeless, no wind, no sound. Only the stars above, and that dark spire, waiting. As they approached, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer just audio. It carried compressed data, Marcus's files, encrypted memories, even his retinal scan. Inside, the walls shimmered with unfamiliar tech, Vocari, but fused with something else, something older. The engineer muttered that this place shouldn't exist. The spire's interior bent light wrong. Echoes happened before sound. Time didn't feel linear. At the core was a chamber, circular, humming with dormant energy. Then, the A. Room spoke, not in Marcus's voice, not in any language. It was a feeling, grief, pain, guilt, pride, all compressed into a burst of thought that hit Voss like a punch. She fell to her knees, gasping. Hale aimed his rifle, scanning for targets, but there was nothing, until Marcus stepped from the wall, not a hologram, not a ghost, a man, breathing, pale, eyes sunken but alive. "I told them," he rasped, voice shaking. "I told them to stay away." Voss reached for him, disbelieving. How are you alive?" He didn't answer at first, just stared at her, then past her, then at the spire's walls, as if remembering something too large for words. Then he spoke quietly. "I didn't die in the blast. The sundiver didn't destroy the queen. It connected me to it, and something else connected to both of us. Something that lives in the spaces between thought, between species. It saved me. Or maybe it used me." Voss frowned. "What are you saying?" Marcus touched the wall. A ripple spread across the metal like surface, revealing star maps, energy signatures, biological data, millions of entries. "The Vocari weren't the threat," he whispered. "They were fleeing, running from something worse, something older than time." Voss stepped back. "The swarm was running?" "Yes." His eyes darkened. "And now that I've been touched by what chased them, it knows where we are." Suddenly, alarms shrieked in Voss's helmet. The orbiting crew shouted over comms. Something massive had appeared on sensors, outside real space, folding through dimensions in ways human, math couldn't define. A shape, a presence, not Vocari, not alive, not dead. Just watching. Marcus grabbed Voss's shoulder. "I'm the beacon now, and I need you to shut me off." "What?" "I'm the signal. I'm broadcasting it, not just here, everywhere. It's using me as bait." Voss's mind reeled. "But if we shut you off, you kill me. For real this time. And maybe save Earth again." Hale raised his weapon, unsure. The engineer begged for more time. But time was the one thing they no longer had. The stars around the planet began to dim, one by one, like eyes closing. And just as Voss made her choice, Marcus smiled. "Tell them. I saved it twice." Then the spire screamed. The walls turned to liquid. Hale fired, and the signal cut out. For 3 heartbeats, the galaxy was silent. Then, in the darkness beyond the brown dwarf, something blinked open, and it was listening. The crew of the Lucian's Edge returned to Earth in silence. Commander Voss didn't speak during debrief. Neither did Hale. The engineers, medics, AI handlers, none of them could explain what they saw, not in terms that made sense. Official.
Reports were redacted, then buried. The signal was labeled a false echo. Marcus Wren was once again marked as KIA. Case closed.
Mission classified. But Voss knew better. Something had blinked open out there. Something older than the Vocari, older than stars. And Marcus's final words, "I'm the beacon now," still echoed in her bones. 3 months passed. Then came the dreams. It started with the linguist, Dr. Elias Wren. He began sketching strange symbols during sleep, always the same curved lines, spirals, patterns like brain folds etched in glass. He claimed they weren't dreams at all. He said he was remembering stars that had never existed, a place with no up or down, a city that breathed. Soon after, he vanished, left in the middle of the night, no message, no trace. Then came the AI handler, Priya Nguyen. She began hearing whispers in the station systems, messages hidden in static. One day she walked into the ocean wearing her lab coat and never came out. They recovered only her comm device broadcasting a fragmented voice. Marcus is still inside. Commander Voss locked herself inside her quarters. She played back Marcus's transmission 1,000 times, analyzed every frequency, every echo, and in the quietest part of the spectrum, hidden in noise, was a new layer. A frequency that hadn't been there before. It wasn't human, not vocari. It was a code, alive. She brought it to Admiral DeSanto, who laughed in her face. You want us to believe a dead man is sending living code from a non-existent planet? He scoffed. You sound like him. Voss left the meeting without speaking. That night, the sun dimmed. Just for a moment. Across Earth, satellites blinked, power grids surged, the global magnetosphere rippled. Astronomers stared in confusion, as solar data showed the sun hesitating, not flaring, not pulsing, pausing. For 3 full seconds, it stopped burning. And then restarted, like a heart skipping a beat. Voss knew what it meant. The thing Marcus warned about. It had found its way through. She left Earth the next day in a stolen reconnaissance pod, tracing old coordinates. Places Marcus had studied. Derelict Vocari colonies, dead systems where strange gravitational anomalies had once been recorded. She followed the pattern until it led her to a place not on any map. Sector Null, a space that shouldn't exist. There, drifting in blackness, was a ship, not human, not Vocari. Just there. A fractal geometry of metal and thought. Voss docked. With it. Inside, it wasn't a ship. It was memory. She walked through corridors shaped like DNA, heard songs made from pulse and nerve. And at its heart, floating in a pool of liquid thought, was Marcus. Alive. But changed. He turned slowly, eyes glowing not with light, but understanding. I told you not to follow, she whispered. What are you now? His voice echoed with harmonics beyond language. A bridge. The chamber pulsed. Not with power, with warning. They're not coming, Erin. They're already here, and they're not a species. They're a decision, made at the beginning of time. One that wants to erase anything that tries to escape death. She shook her head. Then why are you helping it? He looked at her with something like grief. Because I'm the only one it listens to, and I'm dying. When I go, the door opens. She stepped forward. Then let's shut the door. His eyes narrowed. The only way to shut it is to end the signal. The one I carry. The one you now carry too. She went cold. You infected me. No, I warned you. But it listened to the warning. Suddenly, the memory ship shifted. Lights vanished. The black between stars grew teeth. Something was waking. Marcus took her hand. You have one chance. Burn this place. Burn me. Or Earth is next. A rumble shook the ship. Outside, space twisted. Stars, melting like wax. A shape unfurled from the dark. Not a ship, not a creature. Just intention made visible. It was looking for a way in. Voss pulled the emergency charge from her belt. One press would ignite a fusion chain reaction. Enough to burn everything within light seconds. Marcus smiled one last time. Make it count. She hesitated, then pressed the trigger. White light. Silence. Earth's skies rippled again, and a message arrived 2 weeks later from a dead relay on Europa. 7 words. I closed the door. For now. But astronomers had already noticed something new in the sky. A second sun. Moving. They called it the false sun. It hung in Earth's sky where nothing should be. Not in orbit, not in space. It hovered in possibility, seen only at certain angles, in certain moments, like a thought trying to remember itself. Astronomers couldn't, agree on its distance. Satellites malfunctioned, trying to photograph it. Yet people across the planet began seeing it in dreams. Children drew it without knowing why. Survivors of the Vocari War woke up screaming, saying it was staring at them. Watching. The governments of Earth tried to contain the panic. Official statements labeled it an optical refraction caused by solar plasma anomalies. But the people didn't buy it. Not when electronics started flickering with voices whispering "remember." Not when radio towers across the globe began transmitting distorted versions of Marcus Wren's last words, warped as if by an alien throat. We closed the door, but not the eye. In a bunker deep beneath New Reykjavik, Hale sat alone in the dark. He had vanished after the Spire mission. Everyone assumed him dead. But he had been hiding, trying to scrub the signal from his brain, from his bones. He had heard it too. The voice. Not Marcus's. The other one. The one that waited in the silence between seconds. And now it was getting louder. A knock on the bunker door jolted him upright. No one knew he was here. Not even the AI grid. He opened the lock. Standing there was a girl. No older than 10. Pale. Hair like sun-bleached ash. Eyes too ancient to be human. She didn't blink. "You left the door open," she said calmly. Hale raised his weapon. "What are you?" She smiled faintly. "I am the thought Marcus left behind." She handed him a device. Small. Smooth. Alien. The false sun is not what's coming. It's what's remembering us. She turned and vanished before his eyes. The device pulsed once, then displayed coordinates. Hale, against every instinct, followed. The coordinates led to the ruins of Station Lysander, an old orbital listening post abandoned after the Vocari War. The airlocks were still functional. The lights flickered as Hale entered. But something was different. The walls were covered in new data. Strange biological maps, neural growth patterns, cosmic alignments, and every file was tagged with one name: Marcus Wren. A hidden terminal blinked to life. The screen showed a video file. Hale played it. Marcus appeared, thinner, aged, but alive in a way that radiated pressure. His voice was calm. "If you're seeing this, the false sun has manifested. It's not a weapon. It's a question. It asks, do you deserve to be remembered? If you answer wrong, it erases. Entire civilizations, entire timelines." He paused. "I found something beyond the Vocari, something older than thought. It doesn't conquer, it forgets, it unmakes. But I found a flaw. It remembers resistance. Just once, then never again." He leaned closer. "You must resist. And lose. That's how it forgets you. That's how we survive." The message ended. Hale sat frozen. The lights dimmed again. Then the station trembled. Something had found him. He looked outside the viewport. The false sun had moved. It was closer now, just above Earth's orbit. And beneath it, in low atmosphere, new anomalies began forming. Folds in air, holes in logic. Cities began flickering between versions of themselves. Past, future, ruined, whole. People walked into rooms and came out different. Some vanished. Others returned speaking languages no one recognized. And one name kept repeating across all channels: Marcus Wren. But he was nowhere to be found. Until a group of miners on Titan unearthed a perfectly preserved sphere beneath the ice. Inside, encoded in quantum strands, was a memory. A man standing on a world of shadows, whispering, "To make it forget you, you must die in a way it can't remember." As Earth spiraled closer to the false sun's influence, the planet began, dreaming the same dream. A sky with no stars, a voice with no mouth, and a man walking toward it alone. Again. In the shadow of the false sun, Earth began to come undone. It started small, lost time, flickering streetlights, children waking up with memories of lives they'd never lived. Then came the fractures, entire cities blinking in and out of reality, oceans briefly vanishing and reappearing miles inland, and people dissolving into echoes the moment they spoke forbidden names like Wren or Spire. Only the broken remembered. Commander Aaron Voss awoke in a hospital that shouldn't exist. Clean, sterile, wrapped in the illusion of safety. But outside the windows nothing moved. The city skyline was painted on a dome. She stood, barefoot, heart racing. There were no shadows in the room, no clocks, no time. And then Marcus walked in, or a version of him. Younger, smiling, dressed in Earth military blacks. But his eyes were wrong, too still, too hollow. "Hello, Erin," he said gently. "I'm your comfort protocol." She backed away. "You're not him." "No," he agreed. "But I carry his shape, his rhythm, the version of him that the false sun remembers." That was when she understood. This wasn't a hospital. It was a containment cell, a memory loop, and she was being held in place by a version of Marcus that the enemy could predict. She ran. The walls rippled as she moved, turning from white to bone to circuitry to screaming sky. She forced herself through door after door, reality bending with every step. Until finally, through a tear in the simulation, she fell out into cold space. The real Lucian's Edge was adrift, hidden in low orbit around Ganymede. Time there moved slower. The ship's emergency AI reinitialized as soon as it recognized her. "Commander Voss, elapsed absence, 472 days. Memory integrity, 61%. She collapsed to her knees. Then Hale's voice crackled through a nearby comm. "Found the pattern," he said. "Every person the false sun copies is a map, and every map leads to a memory it wants to keep. But Marcus made himself a contradiction. That's why it can't fully erase him." She pulled herself up. "Where is he?" "Everywhere. Nowhere. But there's a version of him still broadcasting from the dark layer. Not in this universe. Underneath it." Hale transmitted coordinates, dangerous ones. Not in physical space, but in conceptual drift. They'd need to sync their minds, inject memory-stabilizing agents, and plunge into the signal echo from the spire. If they were wrong, they'd burn out their nervous systems. If they were right, they might reach him. Voss agreed without hesitation. The jump was not a leap through space. It was a fall through thought. She and Hale crossed fragments of memories that weren't theirs, war-torn skies, alien archives, cities grown from bone and light. And then, in a realm where gravity was regret and light bled backward, they saw him, Marcus, the real one, suspended in a lattice of thought, screaming without sound. Every memory he had was being copied, rewritten, looped. Around him swirled a storm of data, the false sun's hunger, seeking the perfect version of him to use, to mimic, to send back as its prophet. But Marcus had done something extraordinary. He had poisoned his own memories. Every time the false sun tried to copy him, it inherited a virus, a concept it couldn't tolerate, free will. Voss reached out. Marcus turned toward her, his face bleeding light. "You came back." She nodded. Again. "I have one shot left," he whispered. "I've compressed the virus. It's not a weapon. It's a story. One the false sun can't tell. You have to carry it." Voss took the data, her mind fracturing as it entered. Her. The last thing she saw was Marcus disintegrating into pure contradiction, his final act an act of refusal. Then she and Hale snapped back into real space. Gasping, burning, changed. Voss opened her eyes aboard the Lucian's Edge, her mind echoing, with a simple phrase, "I remember because I choose to." The false sun, sensing the contamination, began to fracture. Across the world, illusions broke, people snapped out of loops. The second sun blinked, staggered, hesitated, and that was its mistake, because now Earth remembered Marcus Wren. and memory was the one weapon the enemy couldn't erase. They called it the Day of Splinters. On that day, across every continent, reality fractured like glass under pressure. Mountains flickered between stone and ash. Forests bloomed in reverse. People stood beside versions of themselves, some older, some dead, some still crying out names from lives they'd never lived. The false sun had begun unraveling its final defense, memory collapse. If Earth couldn't remember itself, it couldn't fight. It couldn't resist, but Earth did, because somewhere in the chaos, someone had told the truth. Voss broadcast the story. The virus wasn't code, it was narrative, something older than data, older than language, the kind of story that could only be carried by choice. And when she told it, told what Marcus did, what he became, and how he tricked the Unmaker into remembering freedom, people listened. And something happened. The false sun blinked, not just dimmed, doubted. Because stories are paradoxes. They exist and do not. Their memory wrapped in emotion, shaped by will. And the false sun, built to erase, had never encountered meaning before. That was the crack Marcus made. Hale, now fused with the last living fragments of the Vocari archives, began coordinating global resistance, not with weapons, but with remembrance. They launched memory beacons across the planet. Nodes that pulsed human defiance, lullabies, war cries, last words whispered to dying lovers, pain and love and everything in between. The story spread. But the sun grew angry. It reached down. The sky opened like a wound, and from it poured the architects, beings made of logic and law, clad in impossibility. They were the hands of the false sun, sent to snuff out the flame of choice. One by one, they descended on cities, rewriting people where they stood, converting resistance into compliance. But one city held, New Reykjavik. Because there, in the Almaiga center of the storm, stood the girl, the one who had knocked on Hale's bunker door. She was older now, or younger. It was hard to tell, but her eyes burned with something the architects couldn't parse, grief without surrender. She raised her arms, and the story changed. Every story Marcus had seeded across reality, every echo, every fragment, she carried them all. And she retold them in a single breath, a scream that became light, a pulse that swept across the planet. For a second, everything stilled. The architects froze. The false sun twisted in orbit, its perfect circle unraveling, collapsing into spirals of indecision. And then came Marcus, not in body, not in voice, but in every human who stood their ground. The virus had matured. It had become identity. And the false sun, designed to destroy, not understand, tried to process what Earth had become. It failed. It tried again, failed harder, because the planet it once labeled as a primitive echo was now a world made of contradiction, of memory that couldn't be controlled, and at Yoi, the edge of orbit, aboard the wreckage of the Lucian's Edge, Voss prepared the final act, a beacon made from Marcus's last breath. She activated it. The beacon pulsed outward, turning every voice on Earth into a version of his. They all said, "The same thing, we choose to exist." The false sun screamed, but not aloud. Inward, it folded, collapsed into itself, like a question devouring its answer, and the sky returned. Blue, silent, alive. For a moment, Earth stood still, then children laughed, birds flew, and memory, real memory held. But, high above, where the remnants of the false sun had burned away, a single ember floated, a golden eye. Watching, waiting, not for weakness, but for doubt. And somewhere in the background of Earth's electromagnetic field, a faint whisper echoed through. "The static. I saved you once. I'll do it again." They thought it was over. For months after the false sun's collapse, Earth breathed easy. Skies remained blue. Gravity held firm. The fractures in reality sealed themselves, some slowly, some violently. People returned to lives they barely remembered, dreams faded, and the world settled into something resembling peace. But peace is never the end. Peace is the breath before the next scream, because Marcus Wren wasn't done. Not truly. Deep beneath the crust of Luna, in a vault that had not existed until the day the false sun died, a signal began to pulse. It was faint, outside the EM spectrum, inside the bones of causality itself. Scientists at the Hadrian Crater Array detected it, but couldn't isolate it. Until one name emerged from the data, etched in quantum decay: M. Wren Voss was the first to respond. She had retired from service, but the war never really left her. She didn't sleep much. The nightmares were too vivid. Dreams of cities blinking out mid-laugh, of faces erased in mid-word. When the call came, she didn't hesitate. She left the mountains, the peace, the illusion of rest. Hale joined her at the lunar vault. He looked older now. Not physically, but spiritually, like someone who had lived too many lifetimes in too short a span. He brought with him the girl. No one ever learned her name. She didn't age, she didn't eat, but she remembered everything. And that was why the vault opened for her. Inside, they found not a chamber, but a bridge, a shimmering, impossible expanse stretching through raw space-time, neither machine nor memory, but a third thing. The corridor vibrated with echo logic, frequencies built on story. Marcus had built this, a final failsafe, a place between places, a last light. Voss stepped in first. What she saw defied form. Billions of versions of Earth suspended like thoughts, each balanced on a knife edge of survival. In most, the false sun had won. In some, humanity had never even begun. But in a handful, just a few, Earth had fought back. And in each of those, Marcus Wren had been there. Not always a soldier, not always a man, sometimes not even alive, but always a choice. This was what he had become. Not a hero, a story engine. In the heart of the bridge, Voss found him. One final instance of Marcus, more light than flesh. He turned toward her slowly, his voice wrapped in echoes from 1,000. Doomed timelines, you made it. She stepped forward, breath caught. What is this place? A memory of possibility, he said. I built it in the fold, the place the false sun couldn't see. But it's breaking now. Why? Because it's waking up again. Not the sun, something older, the thing that dreamed the sun. It heard our resistance. It noticed. He handed her a data crystal. Inside it was a map, not of stars, but of futures. There's still one door left open, he said. The first one, the origin. I tried to reach it, but I'm anchored. You're not. You still have doubt. Voss shook her head. I'm tired, Marcus. So tired. I know, he said gently. But you're still human. That's all this thing has never understood. We doubt. We hope. We resist. Not because we think we'll win, but because the fight itself defines us. He stepped back, and the bridge began to crack. Go, he whispered, and tell them the story, again and again, until it forgets to. Erase us. Voss turned. She ran. The moment she stepped out of the bridge, the lunar vault collapsed behind her. The mountain above it melted into sky, and the girl, still watching, still silent, spoke for the first time in days. It's begun. Again. From beyond Saturn, a new signal bloomed. Not circular like the false sun, angular, sharper, hungrier. Earth's skies darkened once more, but this time they were ready, because now humanity didn't just remember Marcus Wren. They carried him in. Every story, every whisper, every final stand. And the next time the dark came calling, it would find not one man, but millions, each ready to say the words that made the universe hesitate. We choose to exist.